Thank you. Thank you. How about it for Jeremy? Thank you so much.
All of that? Richard, that was truly lovely. Truly lovely. Thank you. May I begin by sharing some wisdom from a poet with all of you? This is from Jenny Joseph, titled Warning. For the women who are used to hearing scripture and you have to translate when it's all about the men, guys, this is all about the women, but it's for you too. Warning. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat, which doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say we've no money for the butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not shocked or surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple. This is from a book by the title, When I Am an Old Woman, I Shall Wear Purple. And as I prepared for today's lesson on the topic of wisdom should be shared, can't be taught, I thought that was what I really wanted to begin with. And it carries for me special meaning. That was one of my mother's favorite poems. She passed away in 2002. But my daughter, Roma, is named for my mother, Roma. And so this morning, as I was doing my final prep in my study at home, I got to read the poem to Roma. And she thought she should be able to spit and curse and do all. I said, no, you're not old. You're not old. And I'm also grateful that I was a little concerned when I got here. I'm not one to be afraid of my age, but I'm not one to announce it all the time. And when I kept seeing the 60 on everything, I was like, really, people, chill. And then I realized I am as old as your church. So you turn 60 in May, I'll turn 60 in June, or in August, we'll all be together. I've always taught. Like my first job out of college was teaching at the high school I graduated from. A little bit of welcome back Cotter sort of experience going on in Western Kansas. When I first moved to Marin in the early 90s, I had a day job as essentially a secretary for a stockbroker, and then a night job teaching SAT prep to high school students. I worked as a TA to pay for part of my MBA, and then after my MBA, I just stayed in academia for the better part of 25 years. And much of which was at Stanford, and I graduated after 13 years, and most people get out of the business school in 2. But I graduated right about the time Ken and I moved to Marin, and now I still keep my finger in. I teach nights for USC 1 night a week in their online masters, but I also get to teach in moments like this, and I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since Deanne reached out to me and asked if I could be with you on this particular Sunday, and what would I like to talk about? And I said, I've been doing a lot of work in wisdom and wisdom studies, I said, I like the concept that wisdom is to be shared, not taught. And so I don't see myself as a teacher today, but just someone here to share some wisdom of my own, mostly wisdom of other people. So the context for this conversation, first of all, I had to look up. I love I don't have slides today. Relax those who are like, oh, it hadn't advanced yet. There's nothing to advance. And the context for this is really old. It actually comes from older than me. 1916, Carl Jung said this: "One cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be of little importance in the evening. And what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie." Over 100 years ago, Carl Jung made the distinction that Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan priest that I follow, took to call the two halves of life. And that's what I really want to have us think about as the context for this conversation about wisdom. And I often hear the phrase, what got you there won't get you here, or what got me there won't get me ahead, which was coined by Marshall Goldsmith. But it's the whole concept that at different points in our life, we need different skills, different insights, different approaches. And I like the way Richard Rohr talked about it in terms of there really is like a fulcrum in life. There's a point in life where what we had done early in our lives becomes less important, and there is a second half, a second chapter that becomes more important. In his book, Falling Upward, he says it this way: "The task of the first half of life is to create a proper container for one's life and to answer the first essential questions. What makes me essential? How can I support myself? Who will go with me? What makes me significant? How can I support myself? Who will go with me? The task of the second half of life is quite simply to find the actual contents that this container was meant to hold and deliver. As Mary Oliver, the poet, puts it, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" So thinking through what has gotten you to the place you are today has obviously worked. We are all here. We are all upright. We are all engaged. What has gotten us to this point has been effective, but may not be the best set of skills to take us to the next half, the next chapter of life. I said that I'm not going to teach, but I really feel naked up here without PowerPoint slides. So hang on just one second here. Oh, man, I feel so much better having a flip chart behind me for these remarks. Now, a couple of thoughts about the flip chart. First of all, it worked much better in the hallway than it is right now. There we go. Secondly, I am going to illustrate this concept, but my illustration is directionally important. It's important that you see the image that I create. It's not important that you read the words that I put up here. I'm going to talk through everything that goes on this, and when I finish, the ushers are going to give you a handout. Okay, so don't worry about trying to capture this in the content, but in the spirit of what we're going to talk about. And now with that, I think I need markers. There we go. Okay. Oh, I feel better. All of a sudden, I feel better. Okay, now with this, hold the rainbow for a little while. Let's start with a dull color. There we go. Start with black. Now, watch what I do here. This is very important at this point. Okay. That is the image I want you to hold in mind. It's an X for those in the back row by Brandy. And what is apparent to me, and in the reading that I've done, not just from Richard Rohr, but also from Chip Conley, who I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, is that in the early part of our lives, we are very focused on the resources, the skills, the experience, how I'm going to make money, am I going to raise a family, who I'm going to live with, and all of that achievement that goes into the early part of life moves us from at the bottom where we begin with a growth mindset of what's next, where am I headed, and from that growth mindset, we then move into, as a young person, emerging adult. I think most of us have passed that. No judgments, and then ultimately to where I would say we exist as an embodied adult. And Chip Conley, and the research that he has done with the Modern Elder Academy, he talks about that this is, you might imagine that this takes us from, oh, there we go. This takes us from the chain is what's struggling on the back. Oh, there, that's what we needed. That's it.
Is that going to do it?
Yeah, the chain was what was struggling us there. This takes us from, it's a 16 up to anywhere from 40 to 65. That we go through this experience of what it's like to be looking forward to adulthood, like my children, my 5-year-old, my 8-year-old, just can't wait until they're older. Like, no, slow down, take your time. And then move to, thank you so much. Could we have just a round of applause? That's, that we go into being an emerging adult and then ultimately at some point an embodied adult. And at that point, there's almost this sense of, is that all there is? Is that what I've done all of this for? And many people call this a midlife crisis, which is a phrase that I really want to urge you to stop using now that I've coaxed you into using it the first time. But what Chip Conley says is it's not, we don't need to put the language of crisis into this, but it really is a midlife chrysalis. It is an opportunity, bless you, it is an opportunity to rethink, reshape, and re-become what we need for the second half of life. And so as we move up that continuum, and this is the one that's tough for me as I approach 60, we become the embodied elder, and ultimately the elder flower. And this journey towards adulthood, and this can go up to 105 or even higher as we want to look at it, this point right here, this point right in the center is that moment where we can decide what it is that I'm going to become, what it is that I am going to do next. Chip calls this the emerging elder, and also talks about this is the point where we are in the chrysalis phase. The chrysalis phase is when the caterpillar, who has been working really flipping hard, goes into the cocoon, and then in the chrysalis, in that liminal state, is reconfigured, rebuilt, and emerges as the butterfly. And that concept of stepping into being an elder for others. Now, I wanted you to stop saying midlife, the C word. Another phrase that I think we need to limit our use of is that elder doesn't need to be at the heart of elderly. But those of us who have life's experiences, who have wisdom to share, we can actually step into being an embodied elder. Chip Conley founded what's called the Modern Elder Academy that he found when he was 54 years old and working at a startup, the founders of which were 27. It was like, I realized I needed to be the adult in the room. And for many of us, it's stepping into, with grace and with comfort and with some level of pride, that we now are at a place where we can perhaps take our foot off the gas pedal. We don't have to be doing the achievement that got us to our mid-50s, mid-60s, mid-70s, but that it allows us to then be the person who can share wisdom. Now, I titled this talk, Wisdom is to be Shared, Not Taught, in that I really wanted us to think about that it is our experience, probably more so when things didn't go well, that allows us to bring wisdom into a situation. It can be that we have wisdom from when things went well, but oftentimes our successes aren't nearly as interesting as our mistakes or our failures or the challenges that we've had. I do a lot of work with entrepreneurs, and often investors who are thinking about making an investment in an entrepreneur will ask, what companies have you already started? And where have you been successful? And where have you failed? Because it is in the failure and in seeing the lessons from the failure that an investor will realize, this is somebody I need to take a shot on. If somebody either can't acknowledge they failed or can't acknowledge what they learned from it, it's a riskier investment from a VC or an angel investor's point of view. And so I wanted all of us this morning to just be able to take some joy and some pride in the experiences that we have that allow us to step into being an elder. At this stage, once we have stepped out of that experience of being the emerging elder, at this stage is where we really are able to bring mastery, legacy, and wisdom to the communities that we have the privilege of being a part of. I love that we acknowledge Richard as we began and his transition on Easter Sunday. How poetic and fitting, but to really look at the legacy that we all experience from what he was able to create for us here. And so thinking through, what is it that is my legacy? What is it that I have achieved mastery in? And what is it that I am then able to share with others? Now, a couple of caveats about sharing your wisdom with others. This would be a great point, Brandy. I do have this in much cleaner detail as a handout. I ran 50 copies off, and so it may need to be one per household in a couple places. If you don't get one, snap a photo of somebody else's handout. But I've taken the illustration from Chip Conley's work at Modern Elder and have put it on a handout. But I want to give you a couple of insights about sharing your wisdom. First, you need to be invited. Yeah, sorry about that one. Deanne will never have me come back again if you all jump into her office on Tuesday or Wednesday and say, so I've got some wisdom to share with you. You know, the color of paint. No, that's not what I'm talking about. You have to either be invited, or who remembers the first sentence out of my mouth? May I have permission to share? May I have, oh, that's true. That was the first, do I have to follow that? Then when I started, well done, Giselle, well done. And then after that, I said, may I have permission to share the wisdom from the poet, Jenny Joseph? So we can share, but we want to be sure that we're in dialogue with somebody who is open to and welcoming that which we have to share. The second caveat that I want to add to that is, if you're uncertain, it doesn't mean you need to be silent, but it may mean you need to tread even more carefully. I will often say something to the effect of, I'm wondering about, or I'm curious if. Rather than a direct statement, I will soften it with a question so that what I think is wisdom, what I think is wise, what I think people need to hear, lands with a sense of possibility rather than, I know this is what you need to do. This can be particularly difficult for those of us who are parents or grandparents because we know what we would have done if we could go back and remake that decision that we chose the wrong job or we chose the wrong partner. But that's our life. That's our experience. And so not only should we have permission or invitation to share, but we want to do so in a way that we share with possibility and with opportunity, not with absolute certainty. So the two items I want you to think about this week as you let this construct of the two halves of life from Father Richard Rohr and the midlife chrysalis from Chip Conley, the two things that I want you to think about is, regardless of the physical age, where do you see yourself on your career journey, on your life's journey? I know that, touching 60, I should be in the chrysalis. Oh, I would love to retire. I look at my friends on Facebook that are retiring, and I recognize that Ken and I decided to be late in life parents. So with a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, I'm not retiring for many more years. So part of me is still in the embodied adult, part of me is in the emerging, and part of me thinks in certain areas I can actually step into, rather than being the recipient of mentorship, be the one who offers mentorship. And so I invite you this week to think about where it is that you fall, and then where would you like to be able to share your wisdom as your legacy? Perhaps it's a community that you already know, perhaps it's within your family or your employment or other nonprofits you're a part of, and maybe it's a community that you need to yet go find. Maybe there is a volunteer opportunity or a school community or a school opportunity or a school community that would benefit from you being able to bring your wisdom to a world that so needs and welcomes the contribution that we have to offer. I included for you the two books that I used in preparing this, as well as the website for the Modern Elder Academy, where I've taken some courses, both online, and Ken and I have taught courses for them. Not as a promotional piece, but just if you want more, to feel free to go there. I also listed my email address and the newsletter that I do, which is free. It's on communication. Because as I was doing the prep yesterday for today, I realized this is what I want to talk about in my next newsletter, is the beauty of being able to not teach something from a knowledge point, but to share something from a wisdom point. And with that, I thank you so much for letting me be with you today. Namaste.